in live streaming over to Facebook. So we are all, as I'm sure all of you are too, just starting to learn how to juggle all these different platforms to live stream, to connect, and all of that. Very happy to see all of you. You should know that we are live streaming over on Facebook. And so if you're shy and don't necessarily enjoy having been seen by random strangers, feel free to turn off your video. But of course, we would love to see you. But just so you know, we're also live streaming on the Facebook. So then if you're shy, you might want to turn your video off. Then the other thing too is, again, we're all learning about this. Also, if you don't put a picture for your profile, then it will just show you whatever login information that you provide. I can see right now, for some of you, it's like it has a name, like, so-and-so's iPhone, and some of you, it has your name. Some of you, even your email. Again, if you are shy about that kind of information going out, you could put, your favorite pet's picture, as long as the other pets don't know that you've chosen one and not the other. So just so you know what we're seeing or not seeing, and also on live streaming on Facebook, what's seen and what's not seen, in the interest of full disclosure. Also, as you might have heard, there have been some issues with Zoom, and it does seem like Zoom, fundamentally, like any business, wants to make money. And so when they suddenly became the most popular platform for the world to communicate, they were put on the spotlight. So as far as I can tell, they are changing things, changing what they used to be doing. But you should be aware too, there has been some questions about the security of Zoom. And that's why we are requiring password to join this. And also, we are not necessarily sending this Zoom link, just so you know, on Urban Dharma side. We are not just sending it out on our mailing list, or just sending it out, on our Facebook either. So we repeat here, if you're watching on Facebook, then at some point I will tell you how to request for the Zoom information. Again, we don't want to just put it out there. So that's why I said at some point. So if you took the trouble to watch the whole thing for an hour and a half to get that information, I'm just going to assume that, you are not spending all that time, just to get that information and then to prank us, by bombing our meeting. Apparently, that's sort of part of what was going on. So anyway, good evening. Good to see all of you. So this is Urban Dharma's Open Sangha night. Before what I cheekily called this zombie apocalypse, we would meet at the temple from 7:30 to 9. So now we are only doing meetings like everybody else through this platform. So this is my living room being transformed into a broadcasting studio of sorts. We have been able to improve the audio but the video is still relying on my laptop computer's laptop video. And I think the quality of that video camera is less than desirable. So I'm a little grainy, and lighting maybe could be improved. And I've tried, getting something to kind of improve the lighting. So I personally am on the lookout for a better webcam, but all the better webcam that is reasonable, meaning not exceeding a couple of $100, seems to be sold out. There are webcams that cost $2,000. Those are readily available. So I keep watching to see if I can get a webcam, even that is $200. There are webcams also that are like $40, but I don't know if that's going to be an improvement on what I already have in the laptop. And the consensus seems to be that the things that are priced close to between 100 and 2 will make some improvements. So apologies, we were not prepared for this. And so this is what you have to settle for until we're able to get a better webcam. So we will begin the evening, first with a period of guided meditation. So this guided meditation will be, there are many different approaches, techniques, traditions of meditation, even within Buddhism. And then even within Tibetan Buddhism, there are different methods, there are different techniques. So the particular method or technique that I am using for these Thursday nights Lojong series, this Mahayana Lojong series, is drawn from the Mahayana Lojong in 7 points by Geshe Chekawa. In Geshe Chekawa's root text, he does not say specifically, he does not give this specific technique of meditation. But in the oldest commentary, which was written by many believe by his immediate disciple, in the commentary that he composed, his commentary on his teacher's composition, he gives this technique in a very kind of brief way, which is simply to say, he says, you should basically train as a preliminary or as a foundation to the main meditations that will be taught in this Lojong in 7 points. In fact, Lojong in 7 points, the root text has 2 main meditations, formal meditations, 2 main meditations. But he says before we can effectively cultivate those 2 meditations, we need to have a foundation. So in terms of the foundation, or in terms of the preliminaries, there is the meditation side, and then there is the what you might call theory side. So these 2 parts are important. Theory is important, and carrying out the theory. So theory is not, so when I use the word theory, you should not think of it as something unimportant. It's sort of like you need something to inform what you are doing. And so what you are doing as the preliminary, in terms of what you should be doing, is to develop presence. So last week I explained this word presence. To develop presence by anchoring your focus, your mind, on your breath. And then in terms of breath, more specifically, for every inhalation and exhalation that you take, you mentally label or count 1, then 2, then 3. According to this commentary, it says all the way to 21. Then if you find yourself losing your focus, right? So that, instead of focusing on your breath, you have wandered off, which, by the way, is not failure. It's just, that's how it's going to be. So don't think, 14, and then your mind is off. Then a few moments later you go, oh wait, it's not that you have failed. It's saying, okay, now go back to 1. I think the analogy would be something like, you're going to weight train, and so then you start weight training, and then the first 2 or 3 or maybe 10 or 20, you feel like it feels good, and then by 21 you start to feel your muscles aching, right? At that point, I'm sure none of us are going to say, oh, I failed, and put down the weights, the dumbbells, and say, oh, I failed, I'm not going to come back to this anymore. No, it doesn't mean you have failed at all. It just means like, aha, now, you have reached sort of the capacity of where your muscles are beginning to say, hello, we're not used to lifting this much. So you need to be kind to your muscles. Likewise, you need to be kind to your mind. It's not used to counting till 21. It's not used to staying focused on something for 21 counts. Unless it is something that is terribly exciting, interesting, pleasurable, then that seems easy. But with the topic of breath, it's not used to kind of staying for 21. So when you find that you have gone away by 7 or 8 or 18, you have not failed. It's just saying, your mental muscle is only used to getting to 7. So then, like weightlifting, maybe you just kind of break a little. And instead of coming back the next day, you can come back like, 2 minutes later. So in terms, when we do this meditation, you can just kind of stop, and just let your mind, do whatever it does. And then you can say mentally, okay, now, hey, mind, let's start lifting again. And then you count 1, 2, 3, until wherever. So it says each time you lose count, you just pause and stop and say, okay, let's take a break, So mentally, even, you might, think whatever you want to think, or let it do whatever it wants to do. Then you can say, okay, now mind, okay, let's focus again. And the goal of this focus is to establish presence. Think of it that way. It is not to shut out the world per se. Although, in order to establish presence, especially at the beginning, the world of senses can be too distracting. So the first foundation, according to this tradition, is to establish presence. Do it by focusing on breath, because breath is such an object that it is always present, right? When it is no longer present, then meditation, you don't have to worry about meditating anymore. So breath is always going to be present. Yeah? So that object is always there. And then another reason is that in the main meditation taught in Lojong, that breath that we are now using to establish presence takes on more meaning. And last week I already talked about this. And so we can go over that after this initial period of meditation. And so we're going to start this meditation. And I'll say a little things at the beginning, kind of to give some suggestions. And you can take those suggestions and work with them. So we will sit for about 20 to 30 minutes, depending. So we'll just see. So just relax and let's try this. Oh, one more thing is the counting. If counting 1 to 21 is too big a challenge, then one technique that I modified, that I've tried and other people have said to be helpful, it is to count in this way. Yeah? 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, all the way to 1, 7. Then 2, 1, 2, 2, all the way to 2, 7. Then 3, 1, 3, 2, all the way to 3, 7. You have finished 21 now, except you've broken it up into 3 sets. You could also try that. I invite you to now enter into this period with the attitude that this is a time, a special time that you're giving yourself, a time that you are giving yourself to do some self-care. To get familiar with a skillful way of caring for yourself, and specifically caring for your heart mind. And even this work of self-care is done with the recognition that only by knowing the right way to care for ourselves, to safeguard our heart, to safeguard our mind, will we then be able to care for others, to safeguard others, to help others. So even though for the next 20 to 30 minutes, it seems like we're doing something that is very individualistic, very personal. But know that we're doing this so that we can more effectively and more naturally be able to care for others, to safeguard others. And we cannot really safeguard others if we don't know how to safeguard our own heart, our own mind. And so now we begin with our mind. To safeguard the mind or the heart, first, let your body relax and settle into its own place. In terms of physical posture, for seated meditation, two key points to remember. The first point is that you want to be seated, however you are seated, whether on a chair or on a cushion. You want to be seated so that you are stable and unmoving. Stable, unmoving, weight equally distributed, and that you are not unintentionally placing excess pressure on one side of the body or the other side. And so now at the beginning, make some slight movements, almost like a pendulum, right, to your whole body. And then swaying a little bit side to side. And then like a pendulum, finding its own quiet place, finding its own stillness. The body will find its own still place. The second point is you want to make sure that your torso, your body, the trunk of your body is straight and upright. And to achieve that, elongate your spine, pull your body upwards, and then release and let it settle naturally until it finds its own place of stillness. Once you feel that physically you are at rest, physically you are quiet and content to be quiet, comfortable, relaxed, then when you're ready, you can start counting your breath. Be sure that you are counting your breath and not using the counting to control your breath. Let your counting follow your breath rather than forcing your breath to follow your count. Inhale, exhale, 1. Inhale, exhale, 2. All the way to 21. Or the modified version whereby inhale 1, exhale 1. Again, inhale 1, and then exhale 2. And inhale 1, exhale 3. All the way to 1-7. And then 2-1, 2-2, all the way to 2-7. And in this way, all the way to 3-7. And with that, you have successfully counted to 21. So that was just a brief meditation. And as I said before we started, you should not judge yourself, even gently, much less harshly. When you say, oh, only reach 8 and then I lost count. This is just, showing where we are, and we should not give up on going back again and again. And then to remember that the goal is to develop presence, so that we are present, so that the mind can be present where the body is, so that the body and mind can be together. Then this breath, for this particular method, elsewhere when I'm teaching mindfulness of the body meditation, I emphasize a different, kind of a slightly different awareness to develop in terms of breath. Here is actually the breath going in and out. But again, no talk about focusing it here. I don't mean to suggest that, but what I am pointing out is that, especially for those of you who have taken the other series, which is the meditation on mindfulness of breath, and that one, I said, try to think of breath as something that arises and ceases from within the body, more like centrally located. I have recommended that for that particular approach. Here, and I'm thinking back, and maybe even 2 weeks ago or last week, if I have suggested that you think of it as, this ballooning, that's okay. But eventually, it's this in and out, the breath. So you can think of it as coming in, going out, coming in, going out. At the end of last week, I said, and even that you can think, breathing in, you're breathing in space. Breathing out, you're relaxing into space. So during this time, especially right now, many of us are feeling, both physically kind of, confined. Then, of course, mentally, emotionally, we also feel very tight and confined. So here with this meditation, as you breathe in, you feel that you're breathing in space and breathing out space. Breathing in, letting space come in, and then relaxing back out into space. Then later, when we look at the main meditations of Lojong, then we breathing in certain things, and then breathe out, we are breathing out certain other things, which those of you who know Tonglen, you know all about this. But again, before we get into Tonglen, the preliminary, the foundational meditation for this Lojong, Mahayana Lojong in 7 points, is to use breath to establish presence. So count your breath, count till 21. And then in between, if you want to have a break from counting, you can think breathing in, experiencing how good it feels when you allow space to come into you, come into your body, come into your mind, come into your emotions. And then as you breathe out, feel how good it is, to now release. Do not need to think, oh, I need space. Just release and feel how good it is to just release. Then no matter how good the release, then the next moment, you're breathing in again. And you feel, allowing space to unfold within you. And then breathe out. spacious. So before we take a break and look at the Lojong text, let's see if anybody has any questions about the meditation session and what I said about this meditation. If there's anything that needs to be clarified, or if you have something to share as well. No? The advantage of Zoom is that it allows you to interact.
Someone sent a message in the chat.
Okay, good. Can you read that for me? Because I can't actually see.
Yes. So it's a comment
Mm-hmm.
by someone. Love the instruction last week to breathe in space, breathe out into space. It is helping with anxiety.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I think I definitely, find that, here's my confession, like the counting, my monkey mind, keeps fighting it, but I will keep working on it. But you cannot be so harsh, with the monkey mind. So sometimes you give it something else. So that other thing, where the counting is just, so you can just kind of, okay, now I'm just, because the goal is still to bring presence, to establish presence. So as I said, like these instructions, right, don't relate to Buddhist teachings and instructions as like commandments, thou shalt or thou shalt not. You relate to them as, these are suggestions that if you take with an open mind and you take seriously, so to say, so you don't just kind of dismiss it, but if you take with an open mind, if you take with curiosity and conviction, trust, some element of trust, what we normally call faith in religious context, some conviction and some trust and some, curiosity, and you experiment. Because in the end, it's your own process. Yeah, even if the Buddha is standing right in front of you telling you, this or that, he is telling you from the place of knowing that these are helpful suggestions. Of course, we believe that the Buddha, knows a lot more about you than I do. So then the Buddha's instructions can be even more precise. But even that, the Buddha is not going to argue with you and say, no, you have to follow exactly what I said. Because it's still your process. So you have to own your process, take responsibility for your own process, and apply the teachings, the instructions accordingly. Yes.
There's another question here in the chat. The person says, I find if I meditate in the morning, it is much easier to stay awake. This time of the day, I begin to fall asleep. Keeping my eyes open is helpful. Any comments?
Yeah, sure. Again, it's part of discovering, what works better for you when. For me, opposite, right in the morning, it's like, I still am thinking of my sleep, not a morning person. I come alive right around this time, you know. So yeah, you find out, like, I think the very first week, I think there was a comment question, you know, like, you know, oh, I don't know, you know, I get exhausted, I can't count, and you know, I said, well, you know, you also have to recognize, you know, the limits of your body. You know, we have a body, and the body has its limits, and its body has its kind of like its needs and its demands. You know, don't fight it. You know, I mean, don't like give in completely, but don't be so harsh with it either. And so you recognize where your strengths and your challenges are, and you only fight battles that you can win to gain confidence. You know, then you can venture out into fighting battles that you're not sure you can win. But you have to start with fighting battles that you know fairly certain, yeah, I can win.
I just wanted to add, Dr. Lai, there was a class maybe a couple of weeks ago that you gave us where you said, focus on the beginning and the end of the breath, like below the belly button, below the belly. And I find that sort of counting from there, feeling the breath start from there, allows me to concentrate more deeply and maybe, you know, get almost to 21 or farther away, because there's a sense of aliveness from focusing in that part of the belly.
Good. Yeah. I did share that. You know, it's like you're counting from in other contexts, we call that place in Vajrayana traditions is called the secret chakra. In East Asia, Chinese call it the dantian, Japanese call it the danden. And so there's something about letting your focus kind of sink down into your body. And that's sort of the lowest part of your torso, which is traditionally said to be about 4 fingers below your navel, around that area. So if you count from there, mentally thinking you're counting from there, it does help your mind to settle. If you're counting from up here, as you suggested, as you pointed out, you know, it goes, you know, off. It goes off, you know. But if you count from, you know, below your navel, you know, there's something about it's grounded, you know, then it might be easier. Again, every one of us is going to be different. So try these different methods, techniques, suggestions.
Thank you.
So a quick break, 5-7 minutes, at least you can you know, stretch a little bit. And then we come back to, we'll look at the text. So the text is called Mahayana Lojong in 7 points. If you Google now, you can find different translations out there, and they're fine, you know. But if you want the version that I am using, then the version that I'm using, you can download from TibetanSpirit.com. You go to TibetanSpirit.com and do a search, you know, for Mahayana Lojong. It'll take you to a link, and there, maybe not enough time during the break because you have to enter some information in order to download the text. So if you don't have this text and you want to look at it, I can tell you, you easily Google, you're going to find other translations, more or less will be the same as what I'm using. Yeah? So we'll take a short break and then we'll be back. So again, very briefly, in case you just joined this series, so a couple of things. One is that, so if you look at this text, this root text, often if you have done some reading or even, you know, heard teachings on this, especially in contemporary presentations of this material, they will say that there are 59 slogans, or what I would like to call one-liners. There are 59 one-liners in this text, and then often this is approached as 59 slogans or 59 one-liners. I said that my emphasis on this series is to say that actually it's not just 59 one-liners, but these 59 one-liners are organized into 7 points or 7 chapters. And under each chapter, those lines that appear in each chapter, they play slightly different roles and have different significance. So I'm going to teach by emphasizing sort of the internal organization of this text and what we can learn about this internal organization. And in that way, I feel that the integrity and the power of this text, this tradition, is kept intact, rather than just distributing it into 59 one-liners or 59 slogans, and you just pick one or the other and think about that. And certainly it isn't wrong, but I feel that when we pay attention to the internal logic that Geshe Chekawa, the author, established, because we know that these one-liners also exist organized in a different form. So when Geshe Chekawa in the 12th century organized these one-liners into this form, he saw a particular logic to organizing them into these 7 points, or these 7 chapters. So the first point is the presentation of the preliminaries, or the basis. So we already talked about the basis of this Lojong practice, right? So the basis for practicing Lojong, there are two aspects to it. One is the meditation basis, which is what we did. So you have to keep working on that basis, that foundation, the ability to be present at will, not only when things are interesting. And then when things are not interesting, then you have no control over presence. So not only when things are interesting, but at will, you can bring presence here, body and mind present together. So that is an important basis or foundation. Then, in the earliest commentary, it says, the other side of this training in the preliminaries, the other side of training in this preliminary is that you need to begin by what, and I will quote, he says, generating the 2 awakening minds. And here it's talking about what we call aspiration bodhicitta and engagement bodhicitta. So he actually says, like you first need to begin your session, which we did not today, because I'm now just introducing this. He says you want to begin your session by generating, meaning producing, these 2 awakening minds. Either last week or the week before, I said that the Sanskrit word bodhicitta can be translated as awakened mind and awakening mind. Awakened mind is the ultimate bodhicitta, and that pertains to wisdom, and that pertains to the teachings on the absence of essence, also known as emptiness. Emptiness here doesn't mean nothingness. It means an absence of essence. A lack of fixity in all contexts. There's a lot more to be said about that. So don't worry if right now you're like, what is he talking about? Just be patient. You know, it's just like, oh, okay, yeah. Emptiness, right? So ultimate bodhicitta pertains to emptiness. Then, and that I would translate as awakened mind. Because when the mind sees the emptiness of all conditions, all situations, all persons, all things, then it's the awakened mind. Then relative bodhicitta is, you could translate as awakening mind. Okay? It's an unfolding process. And this has to do with the love and compassion aspect of bodhicitta, the relative aspect. Here, relative and ultimate are not, it's not a hierarchy, as in ultimate is better, relative is not so good. Rather, they are two sides of the same coin. Two sides of the same coin. So, ultimate bodhicitta pertains to wisdom. Relative bodhicitta pertains to love and compassion. But this love and compassion, to be more precise, is the love and compassion that motivates you to want to free all beings from suffering. So this is not just love and compassion that then motivates you to say, feed everyone or heal everyone, which is very noble, don't get me wrong. You know, that's really good. But here, more specifically, is the love and compassion that then moves you, that motivates you to want to free everyone from suffering once and for all. Completely. It's that kind of love and compassion. And that's the awakening mind. And that's the relative bodhicitta. So here in this commentary, when it says you have to begin this practice by generating the two awakening minds, he's talking about then within relative bodhicitta, within this aspect of bodhicitta, this level of bodhicitta that is the love and compassion that moves you to want to free all beings from suffering. It again has two aspects. The aspirational aspect and the engagement aspect. So in the tradition that I am a part of, the lineage that I'm a part of, we have two prayers that we do at the beginning of all practices, whereby these two prayers we say, these two prayers is what we say in order to generate this relative bodhicitta in its two aspects. I will read this to you. The aspiration bodhicitta is expressed in the following words, with the following words. All mother sentient beings, meaning you should view all sentient beings as being kind to you, like your mother is kind to you, cares for you, loves you. So all mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness. So here it's kind of center stages, right? And those that is most difficult to think kindly of, the most difficult for you to feel warm and fuzzy about. It says, to that extent, you have to include them. Then, of course, everyone else, less than that, no problem. You're like, oh, of course I want them to be happy. Of course I want them to be free. So then it says, all mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, but especially those enemies who hate me, those obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness. In other words, on my path to the state of Buddha. May they experience happiness and be separated from suffering. May they experience happiness. That is the definition of what we mean when we say love. So this is not romantic love. This is the definition of love. May they experience happiness and be separated from suffering. That's the definition for compassion. And then I will quickly establish them in the state of the most perfect and precious awakening. And how can we establish, meaning like, facilitate, lead them to this? By first ourselves becoming Buddha. So this I would relate to that attitude that I say that you need to have when you enter into practice, enter into meditation, and you say, now is the time for self-care. The most complete extent of that is, I need to be Buddha myself. I need to wake up. And then why? It cannot be, because I want to get the heck out of this, this terrible place. ASAP and tata, hasta la vista to the rest of you. I am off, It cannot be like that. It has to be. Why? Why this need for self-care? So that once I know how to skillfully, effectively care for myself, then I can care for all others. So that's what it's saying here. So this we say, this is aspiration bodhicitta. Engagement bodhicitta is expressed with the following words. Thus, so having said the aspiration, so in order to accomplish, to bring to fruition that aspiration, until I achieve awakening, until I achieve Buddha, until I am awake, I shall engage in virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. So that means from now until I'm Buddha. Doesn't matter how many lifetimes from now, I will commit myself to engaging in virtuous deeds of body, speech, and mind. Then until death, meaning from now until end of this life, I will commit to doing that. And then finally, from now until this time tomorrow. So that means you have to do this every day. From now until the next time I say these words, in other words, I will not forget to create virtue, to act virtuously, to be virtuous. What is the meaning of being virtuous? This is not moralistic, okay? It's not harming, not causing harm to yourself, to others. And not only that, right? That is the negative aspect, not causing harm. Then the positive aspect is to engage in that which benefits self and other. both aspects. So this is an important preliminary, according to the commentary. So you have to start your practice by thinking. So if you don't have the exact words, it's okay. You just have to remember these two, like, why am I doing this, for the benefit of all beings, so that I can quickly become a Buddha and truly benefit all beings. So first, it's like, I want to be a Buddha. I want to be awake. Why do I want to be awake? For the benefit of all. Then in order to be awake, so I want to be awake is the aspirational. Then in order to be awake, what do I have to do? Well, whatever I have to do, I'm committed to doing it. That is the engagement bodhicitta. And so you have to begin like this. And this helps us to kind of bring some oomph, some energy to, now I'm going to count my breath. Like a driving force, Sometimes the driving force is like fear. I'm sure all of you have experienced this if you drive, Sometimes you're driving and you're tired, and then you like, thankfully, maybe just for 1 second, you find yourself going off the road. Hopefully only 1 or 2 seconds. And then immediately, right, the adrenaline, you're like, whoa, wide awake, for the next, few miles, I hope, wide awake, you're not going to be moving at all. So this two bodhicittas, generating this at the beginning of your meditation, will provide some energy. Will provide some energy. So he says this is important. And then he says, now, prior to generating these two, there are some things to consider, he says. And this is what last week I said, the 4 thoughts that turn the mind. The 4 considerations. And he puts it in a very nice and compact way, so that I'm just going to read this to you. And this text is found in the book published by Wisdom Publications. It's called Mind Training, the Great Collection. So if somebody can type it on both Facebook and also on this chat, it's called Mind Training, the Great Collection by Wisdom Publications. This commentary is in there. And this Mind Training, the Great Collection, is a really great collection. Great as in big, and also great collection. If you want to see more examples of Lojong texts, I highly recommend that you look into this book. But in there, I will read from there. This is on page 90. It says, reflect on the meaningfulness of having obtained a human existence of leisure and opportunity. And in the traditional teachings, they list out, how can you tell, that you have not just a human existence. Hopefully that's obvious to you, that you have a human existence. But then a human existence with leisure and opportunity. What does that mean? In more elaborate details, it will tell you. It will tell you all the details, such as you're born at a time where the Buddha's teachings are available. You're born at a time where, there isn't like a king or some authority saying, hey, you're not allowed to practice this, otherwise we'll kill you. You're born at a time where, your ability to understand these teachings is not hampered, either because of a mental defect, or challenge, or that, you are blind and there's no Dharma text in Braille, Bottom line is, I can tell you this. If you are listening to this now, and with interest and not just randomly turned up, I can guarantee you, you have all the leisure and opportunity. So he says, please recognize that. Recognize that you have all these leisures and opportunities. So when we recognize this, then we are like, wow, it's pretty amazing. Sometimes we get so carried away, wallowing in our own misery, then everything gets thrown out of perspective. You see, if you evaluate your worth based on a set of wrong criterion, then of course you're going to be miserable. But if you evaluate, not that I think you should go about evaluating yourself that, but if you're going to evaluate whether you have a meaningful life right now or not, from a Dharma perspective, we say, you do. You have everything that it takes to be free. We have everything that it takes to be free, to be liberated. What else do you want? Oh, I want $1 million. Yeah, okay. Well, then if your criterion is $1 million and you don't have $1 million, then of course, I don't have $1 million, Now go think about, go investigate. Is that a worthy criterion? So here we say, if the goal is to be free from suffering, if the goal is to be happy, do you have what it takes? We say, you have what it takes. Now recognize that. And then it goes on to say, to prevent yourself from wasting it, to prevent yourself from wasting this great opportunity that we have right now. Some of my friends, have been checking in with me and say, how you're doing? And I say, wow, actually, I'm doing well right now, Of course, I'm also recognizing it's the conditions that I live in Nashville, I think if I was in New York City in an apartment that is like 400 square foot and paying $2,000 for it, I don't know if I'll be in such a great space. But I said, oh, I'm doing well, And then these friends will say, I think these times are made for Buddhists. By that, they mean, I think a particular stereotype of Buddhists, like, oh, Buddhists are these people, who like to stay at home, like to meditate, like to be confined, so to say, in that sense, normally I'm not so Buddhist, I like to go out, wander around, running here and there. But there is something to be said about, if you're a Dharma practitioner during this period, if you feel a little kind of tight, you have to turn things around and say, actually, this is that retreat that they have been talking about, It's like, oh, right. Yeah. Whatever they call it, shelter in place, movement, control, order. In Malaysia, they call it that, lockdown, blah, blah, blah. You're like, oh, this is retreat that they have been talking about. Wonderful, right? So figure out. So it says, to prevent yourself from wasting it, you think, I must practice the Dharma. And then more specific to this context, you say, and of all the Dharma practices available, this Lojong tradition is most excellent. You see, in Buddhist training, when we say something is most excellent, so this is the funny logic here. We are not saying that other thing is not excellent. We're saying that other thing is excellent when I'm doing it. But right now, whatever practice I'm doing right now, this is excellent. And so now this Lojong, oh, it's so wonderful. Then it goes on, it says, then reflect. Even though I may have found a human existence of leisure and an opportunity, within my lifespan, there is no time to spare. Since in future lives, or maybe since next month, when this order is lifted, or next week, I must experience happiness and suffering as fruits. Since in future lives, I must experience happiness and suffering as fruits of my virtuous and negative karma, this Lojong is the most excellent virtuous activity to engage in now. So before all kinds of distractions might come later, and later on, we still want to be happy. So if you want to be happy, you don't want to suffer, whether it's tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, next lifetime, now is the time. Now you have the opportunity to strengthen your Lojong, your mind training. Even for the goal of freedom, complete freedom from samsara, from cyclic existence, from confused existence, no path is more profound than this. This training is the supreme cause for attaining Buddhahood for the benefit of both self and others. He says, contemplate these points. Think of this. Let this be the motivation, the driving force for you to say, and therefore, now, let me do this. Let me do this meditation for the sake of becoming Buddha. And as Buddha, I can then truly accomplish this goal of benefiting both self and other. And therefore, now I'm going to do it. And then you start counting. 1, 2, 3, in order to establish presence. Don't need to do this for a long period. Even the whole process from the contemplation of how wonderful the opportunity now is, of how important we don't waste any time, given, that we have the opportunity now. Don't postpone it. Don't wait for later. Because later, when they lift this order, then retreat is over, That means everybody, will have a claim on your time. Hey, do this. Hey, do that. Friends is like, oh, you don't like us anymore. You don't hang out with us, Then boss, then this, then that, all sorts of distractions. So now, less distractions. You're like, I'm going to make full good use of this time. And then you focus, and you do this practice. So this is the preliminary. So it says, first train in this preliminary. First also has a sense of like, in a way you could say, always make sure that you ground yourself in these foundations. So one aspect of this foundation is to change the way you think. The other aspect is to develop presence. And those two have to go hand in hand. So one is sort of the view, the theory. The view and the theory will start on an intellectual level. But the intellectual level cannot solve the hard problems. But without starting on the intellectual level, and if you simply say, okay, now I'm going to count my breath. 1, 2, 3. Even if you count very effectively to 21, but because you don't have the right context for this counting, you could take your skills of counting to 21 to become a tightrope walker and do incredible stunts and not become a Buddha. Or you could develop, your concentration to becoming, a great robber, a murderer. Then not very useful at all. In fact, very harmful. And so these contemplations are important, generating the two bodhicittas in our bodhicitta, relative bodhicitta in the two aspects, very important. My teacher always likes to remind us, he says, it's good to remind yourself, it's good to remind everyone, if you're teaching, if you're sharing the Dharma, that fundamentally, we're not trying to make anyone a better Buddhist. We're not trying to gain more converts so that, the census, will allocate more funding for Buddhist temples. In any case, it doesn't happen like that. No, we are not trying to gain more followers or create more Buddhists. What the Buddha taught is not Buddhism. Buddhism is the religion that developed in cultures at different places at different times. Buddhism is the religion, or in fact, Buddhisms in the plural, are the different forms of this religion that developed at different places in different times, in different cultures, out of the teachings of the Buddha, which we call Buddha Dharma. It is Buddha Dharma that will help us to achieve the happiness that we're looking for. Buddhism may or may not. Becoming a Buddhist may or may not lead to the happiness that you're looking for. Only by practicing the Buddha Dharma that I can say, I can guarantee it will lead to the happiness that you're looking for. It will lead to the freedom that you're looking for. So don't, Buddhism, you can take it or leave it. But the Dharma, that I think we need. So he says, in that sense, doesn't matter what religion you identify with, the Buddha Dharma can help. Even the Buddha Dharma, literally it means the Buddha's Dharma. But actually, the true meaning of Buddha Dharma is not the Buddha's Dharma, as if the Dharma belongs to the Buddha. But the true meaning of Buddha Dharma is the Dharma, or the truth, and the teachings that will lead you to becoming Buddha. So the Dharma or the teachings that will Buddhacize you. The Dharma or the teachings that will free you, that will make you wake up, that will make you free, that will make you happy. Happy in the ultimate sense of the word, not this crazy happiness that keeps changing, that we keep chasing, like our definitions of happiness, change like depending on context, depending on where we are, Yeah, sometimes being tickled is so much fun. Sometimes being tickled, it's pure torture. Not that kind of happiness, okay? Sometimes being like, beaten, is like, oh, wow, that was wonderful. I mean, like Chinese massage. Every time I go back to Malaysia, I go to this place. Man, like they really, like get into those muscles, Like I literally come back with a back that is blue-black, bruises, and each time, my family asked me, so how was it? I said, well, I paid them, so I think I'm supposed to say it was good. In another context, if this happened in some back alley, I would be like, oh my God, that was terrible. I need to get someone arrested. Not that kind of happiness. So this superficial definition of happiness, no, we're talking about actually better to say, to be free from suffering. To be free from suffering. To be free from dissatisfaction. To be free from longing. To be free from stress. To be free from trauma. All of that. Free from that. No longer subject to that. So it means, like even in very difficult situation, you're free. So that has to be why we practice these things. So with apologies, there's a lot of vocabulary, there's a lot of religious expressions and this and that. And if those things turn you off, try not to let them distract you, because it's because Buddha Dharma has come down to us, through religious vocabulary, religious communities, religious people. And therefore, it has taken a religious flavor. But the Buddha Dharma itself, I will say, it's not religious. It's not even philosophical, the way we think about philosophy. It's therapeutic. It heals. And that's how we have to relate to the Dharma. And then especially in the Lojong teachings, it says that's how we have to relate to this. So first point, first chapter, only one line. First, train in the preliminaries. Starting next week, we're going to look at the main training, which is the second point. So the second point of the 7 points, it says, the title of the second point is Training in the Two Bodhicittas. Here, it's the ultimate bodhicitta and relative bodhicitta. For each of these two bodhicittas, 2 formal meditations. For each of them, there is 1 formal meditation, but in stages. So the very famous Tonglen, that is the formal meditation for relative bodhicitta. But before, according to this tradition, before you do that, you first need to develop, to acquaint yourself with, to familiarize yourself with absolute bodhicitta meditation. And then under that point, under that chapter, there's also, when you get off the cushion, how do you continue this training? And so we call it the post-meditation training. And so this main training in the 2 bodhicittas consists of on cushion, off cushion. Consists of formal meditation and day-to-day life. And then in fact, many of the other points, especially point 6 and point 7, where there are many, many one-liners, the biggest chunk, 6 and 7, many of those one-liners are related to advice, guidelines given for the post-meditation session, which is where most of us live our lives. If you were a retreatant, a meditator, then your meditation sessions is more than your cushion sessions is more than your off cushions. Right now for us, it's the opposite, right? We're mostly off cushion. And that's why Lojong is also very relevant to our lifestyle. Yeah, very relevant. So anyway, it's after 9 now, but I want to give a chance in case anyone has any questions. or comments. So let's see. Don't be shy. If you're shy, just type in the chat and Fabiola can read it for me.
I have a question.
Sure.
Can you say anything about the relation of Geshe Chekawa with Jigten Sumgon and the other book that we're studying?
Okay. So this question is from someone who is also involved in another study group, a more intensive study group that takes place Monday, Wednesday, Fridays from 9 to 11. And there we are studying this text called the Buddha's Single Intention. It's the core text for the Drigong Kagyu lineage. So the question is, how is that related to this text? No direct relationship. They live about the same time, but as far as we know, no direct relationship. But of course, you are going to be able to see, where they converge. And it will be no surprise. But as far as we know, no direct relationship. And these two individuals, Kyopa Jigten Sumgen, the founder of Drigong Kagyu, as well as the one who, taught those Vajra statements that we're studying. As far as we know, he and Geshe Chekawa, their paths did not meet.
Thank you.
As far as we know, yeah.
I have a question, Dr. Lai.
Mm-hmm.
When we're talking about our motivation for practice,
Yes.
The idea that we should not practice our motivation is not just to liberate ourselves from samsara, but really we want to liberate all beings. And in order to do that, we need to get liberated first.
Mm-hmm.
I've been practicing for, a few years, and I've really been trying to work to gain that type of motivation. But I have to be, I'm honest with myself, and I'm willing to admit it to everybody here. I'm not there. And, I don't intend just to get liberated and then, leave everybody behind. But I have to say that my motivation, if I'm really honest with myself, it's not to be liberated so I can benefit others. It's more a little different. I want to get liberated, and then once I get liberated, I then, want to help others. But it's the reverse. And so in a way, I feel a bit like a fraud. And, I try to be patient. That's why I'm here in this class, and I want to develop that type of motivation. Do I just need to work on being patient and do the practice, and I just kind of have faith that it's going to come? Or is there something else that you can suggest?
No, wonderful that you feel like a fraud.
Huh?
It's wonderful that you feel like a fraud.
I appreciate that.
because that's an important recognition. In fact, I talk about that. I said, when, especially the way that the Drigong tradition, the tradition I'm in, when we start all our practices with that prayer, all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation, may they have happiness and be free from suffering. That prayer, in fact, the nickname of that prayer is called Dadangma in Tibetan. Dadangma literally means those who hate me. So we begin all our practices by doing that Dadangma, to think about those who hate me, and that, I'm going to do this for the sake of those who hate me, So I say, if you actually mean what you're saying, until you are Buddha, you should feel like a fraud. If you don't feel like a fraud, then you're kidding yourself and you're kidding everyone. So it's good news that you're feeling like a fraud, You're like, oh yeah, I don't really mean that. As in, from my heart, I cannot mean that. But intellectually, I'm sure that idea catches you. And that's important, like, I want to be able to feel that way. But you know, right now, I don't think so. And that's good. Not seeing that is what's dangerous. In fact, if you walk around saying, you know, yes, for the benefit of all, for the benefit of all, I'm very suspicious. You know, I'm very suspicious. Like, But that important disconnect is deliberate. Yeah, it's deliberate. So until you are Buddha, you will feel like a fraud. But there is a skillful way of feeling like a fraud, and there is an unskillful way of feeling like a fraud. The skillful way of feeling like a fraud will motivate you to work through this, which is what you just said that you've been doing. So it's working.
Okay.
The unskillful way of feeling like a fraud would be you start beating yourself and say, you are a terrible person. You just said that you are going to work, you know, to become awake for the benefit of all beings. And now you just cut someone off on the highway and gave them the finger, you know, or the mental finger, right? You're going to be a careful driver, so you're not going to, you know, endanger yourself, you know. But yes, no, it's fine. In fact, it just makes it clear, you know, like I'm not there, you know, but I'm committed to making that a reality. Yeah, so that's good. And welcome to the club. If I have not yet officially welcomed you now in front of so many people and on Facebook, you know, welcome to the club. You are in now. The fraud club.
But let me ask you that. I really appreciate that. It's very reassuring. But you know, I go through this inner struggle every day when I practice. You know, I do the 4 measurables, and I, you know, I really think through this. You know, I feel like I'm not really fully 100% with it. And do I continue this inner struggle every day when I practice, or do I give myself a break and just, you know, say this is my goal, this is where I'm working?
Yeah. So first be kind to yourself. Don't like pull, you know, don't tear a muscle, you know, in this bodhisattva gym. So make sure you don't, you know, tear your muscles in this bodhisattva gym. But at the same time, you know, your goal is to be able to, you know, build weight, right? And bulk, so to say. And so that will involve effort. Yeah. So you have to know, you know, how much to lift and how much to not lift. Yeah? Of course, you cannot be afraid, paranoid about tearing a muscle. You have to be ready, like for the sake of achieving this greater goal of like really building up, you know, strength. Yeah? I will risk perhaps sometimes tearing a muscle. At the same time, knowing, well, you have to do warm-ups, right? So these preliminaries are the warm-ups. And the preliminaries are the warm-ups because then you will not tear a muscle. So important on the level of preliminaries is not, I've said, you know, the preliminaries are not there to wash your mind, you know, like to brainwash you, to indoctrinate you. Like, oh, to be a good person, you know, you have to recognize you have such a wonderful opportunity. Oh, you don't feel like that right now? Oh, you are a terrible person. No. That's like trying to brainwash yourself. So in fact, like, you know, we sometimes said, oh, the Buddha says, don't be attached, you know. Then we think, oh, so then the way to practice that is every time we are attached, we say, bad, 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 bad boy. No, it's not going to work because that's not truly not being attached. That's just, right, suppressing attachment. So the Buddha says, attachment causes pain. Now, how do we practice that? Not by going, okay, not going to be attached now because Buddha says so. Not going to work. Dharma doesn't work that way. It only works when you hear that Buddha says attachment brings pain. So then you say, okay, I have enough conviction that what he said is true. But my experience is not yet convinced that that is always true. So, okay, I'm going to just be more watchful. Then the next time I feel pain in whatever situation, heartache of whatever, then I look clearly. Where did that come from? You start tracing backwards. And we say, before long you'll see, oh, that came from attachment. That's how you develop this muscle of detachment, or the muscle of, not wanting to be entangled anymore. It has to arise genuinely. But it's not going to arise automatically. If that's the case, we're now Buddhists. We've been around for so long. If it will automatically happen, then we should be Buddhists now. But no. But it has to arise naturally. And Buddha says there are things that we can do to encourage this naturally arising decision, this naturally arising determination to not get entangled, to not get caught. Yes, Fabiola.
Yeah, someone else sent a question here.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit different topic, but it's,
Yes.
sometimes when we get used to counting up to 21,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes automated without clarity in mind.
Mm-hmm.
How could we maintain the clarity throughout our meditation?
21, 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13. Go backwards. So that will be one thing to do. Yeah, for sure. Yeah? When that's what I was saying, make sure that you are counting your breath and you are not breathing your counting. Yeah, so when you mentally label, it can become like autopilot. Yeah, so that's when you want to refine that counting so that you pay close attention to, am I counting my breath, or am I using the counting to kind of blur the breath or to control the breath? Then you can count backwards and count frontwards and count the 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3. And then in between you can break to get some freshness, which is breathe in, space, breathe out, relax. So you can switch it out. So that's why I said, you take this not as, commandments, not as rules of the game, but rather, different things that you can tweak. If you always remember that what you are aiming, what the immediate goal of this exercise is to have presence of mind. So then if counting is leading to a lack of presence of mind, stop counting. Don't worry, Geshe Chekawa will not turn up and go, wrong, 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 bad, bad, bad. In the Zen tradition, they have walking meditation, and then they say, then they also have walking backwards. Like if, because sometimes walking meditation, can also become, kind of, and so that's when they say, try walking backwards. Like it takes a lot of focus to walk backwards. Then presence can come back. And again, once that becomes like, once you get good at it, then presence, that's the thing, this monkey mind is always finding ways. So initially it takes a lot of effort to walk backwards or count backwards. So then the mind comes back. Then once it figures out how to do it, right? It says, okay, now you do this. I'm going to go wander around now. Then you have to find something else, to bring it back, But they say also, so here's an incentive. When the mind actually begins to experience itself, there is a certain enjoyment, bliss, or pleasure of just experiencing itself. If you can get to that point, then it's not so easy. It's not so difficult to stay in presence. So you can kind of look forward to that, maybe.
Thank you, said the person.
Yeah, sure. But again, in this approach, the counting is not an end to itself. And the establishing of the presence is also not an end to itself. In other contexts, you establish presence and then maybe that's it, But no, here it's the first step to then go into the main meditations of the two bodhicittas. So then there, we have other things that we are bringing into focus. And we leave the counting behind. So we need to get to that point, where we, without needing to count, we can maintain presence, because then that presence will be used, will be directed to the main meditations. Yeah. So just know that, that's where it's leading. So tonight, I think we should end here. Yeah, reframe, what this context is, that should help bring some space into what we're experiencing. We only focus on how this is not normal, then this is not normal. If we can switch the framework and look at it as how this is normal, we can do something out of this, then it changes. A friend, an old friend, I saw on Facebook, maybe this person is even watching now, said something on Facebook and said, oh, I don't know how long I'm going to stay in this, spiritually and intellectually, such a wasteland, talking about Facebook. Of course, I think, I agree, in many ways, But then I said to him, I said, but have you considered that, there are others who count on you being there so that it is not such an, intellectual and spiritual wasteland? So he was like, oh gosh, you Buddhists again, always trying to change, the framework of looking at things. I didn't think of it that way, but really, and I think, in a very maybe small way, but we can start in these small ways, every time you think, God, I can't stand being in this ridiculous situation, right? We all feel that, big and small. Okay, good. I'm not saying you should not, pay attention to that. But before you decide, I'm going to do everything I can to get out of this terrible, horrible situation, before you immediately commit yourself to that, raise a question. But maybe my being here is important and good to someone else who is also here. Then suddenly, whatever it is that you instinctively want to get out ASAP, you can look at it from a different perspective. Yeah. Now, again, none of these things should be applied indiscriminately in all situations. I'm not talking about, if you're in an abusive situation and things like that, have been taken advantage of, blah, 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 all of that. That's a whole different thing. I think people misapply the Dharma, and unfortunately, it happens. Yeah, I'm talking about something else, or a different context, that you find yourself in a situation that is impossible, that is difficult. But before we immediately, commit to like, I'm going to do everything I can to get out of this, also think, but maybe I can make something out of this so that, it'll be good to others. And how can I make something good out of this so that it can be good for others? Maybe that's what I should be doing here. So this is actualizing some aspect of bodhicitta. There's two ways to graduate from this fraud club. One, give up. One, become Buddha. So I hope, don't give up. Continue to be a fraud until you're not. Have a good night. Have a good day. Some of you are on the other side of the world. Good night or good day. May it be good. May the good prevail. May everyone be free from suffering. And so we dedicate whatever it is, anything good, anything positive that we have shared tonight, that we've learned tonight. Let's dedicate this to the freedom from suffering for all beings everywhere, and the attainment of true happiness for everyone, for all beings everywhere. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Sure.
Great teachings.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Tomorrow.
Good night. Thank you.
Yeah.